The moment his father's portrait shattered against the marble floor, I knew I'd done it right. No one screamed. That was the strange part. It was like the entire executive floor inhaled and forgot how to exhale. Miles Alexander Grant Roman III just stood there, tuxedo undone, tie like a noose around his ego, staring at the oil-painted wreckage of a legacy he never earned. But that wasn't the beginning. It started exactly 17 days earlier, at 9:42 a.m., when he walked into my office like he owned gravity. "You're still here?" he asked, not even bothering to sit. "We don't keep slackers." He didn't smile. Miles never smiled. He displayed teeth. There's a difference. I watched his reflection in my screen as I closed out the quarterly analytics dashboard, the same one showing how my division had carried 42% of the company's net profit last year. He didn't look at the numbers. He looked at my throat like he was imagining it silent. "Pack up," he said, tapping the edge of my desk like it was a countdown. "I need the space for someone hungrier." I didn't argue. That's what made it perfect. No tears, no threat, just a nod, slow and deliberate, like I was being freed from something diseased. I unplugged my mouse, slid my notebook into my bag, and left behind exactly one thing: a USB drive labeled Holiday Mix 2017. He wouldn't touch it, of course. Not immediately. He was too arrogant. But he would eventually, because that's what men like Miles do. They open things they think they understand. That drive didn't have music. It had a single file, XMT Clause 7 BPDF, time-stamped, authenticated. Buried in a signed vendor renegotiation his father let me oversee during the Christmas merger chaos. That clause was my insurance. No, my detonation cord. I had rewritten the company's succession policy under the guise of contract standardization. Clause 7B triggered a multi-agency ethics audit if any employee terminated without cause after 5 years of service filed a complaint within 10 days. It also mandated immediate suspension of any executive whose name appeared in 3 or more high-risk vendor relationships. Guess whose trust fund baby had been sloppy with kickbacks from Digital X? I didn't run. Waited. First silence. Then subtle tension, compliance officers in elevators pretending not to stare, HR scheduling routine check-ins with people who hadn't been spoken to in years. And then, chaos with a linen pocket square. Miles started skipping morning briefings. He blamed jet lag. Then a personal issue. Then his assistant double-booked him for a call that didn't exist. That was when I mailed a single sheet of paper to the board chairwoman. It had one sentence: activate Clause 7B or assume fiduciary liability. No signature, no return address, but they knew. I used the old watermark. Now here's the fun part. The chairwoman didn't contact me. She contacted Miles' father. And that man, Ali Grant, the lion in a silk robe, flew back from his yacht in Croatia and marched straight into headquarters. He stormed into that office, took one look at the audit summary, and knew what I'd done. Witnesses say his hands trembled. Came the crack of the frame, glass and oil splattering across imported stone tile when he hurled his own portrait off the wall. And Miles, the heir, the boy king, he just stood there. Silent, pale. You don't fire a storm and expect sunshine, and I'm not done. The voicemail came at 3:13 a.m., just breathing at first, then a click. Then Ali's voice, lower, cracked, stripped of that bourbon-laced arrogance he used to wear like cologne. "I read it twice," he rasped. "Once as a father, once as a CEO. And both times I saw it for what it was. A noose." Then silence, no apology, no rage, just that final word like it was already tightening. He never called again. By sunrise, the company's stock had dipped 4.2%. A rumor leaked, someone fed it to a finance blog that a governance disruption was underway. Internally, they called it the quiet audit. Externally, issued a press release so sterile it might as well have been written by a mortician. Miles wasn't fired. Not yet. That would have been too merciful. Instead, he was sidelined, given a strategic advisory role, which in Grant Corp lingo meant a glass box and no keys. They stuck him in an unused 18th floor conference room and told him to brainstorm executive efficiencies. He brought in a whiteboard and stared at it for 3 days. Meanwhile, the audit committee reached out to me under the pretense of clarifying procedural context. I met them at a nondescript law office above a Chinese bakery that smelled like almond flour and existential dread. 3 suits, 1 recorder, and a woman named Ree who took notes like she was chiseling them into stone tablets. They didn't ask how I planted Clause 7B. They asked why. I looked straight at Ree and said, "Because I was tired of watching boys inherit ladders they didn't build." That shut them up. But it was Miles' mother, Patricia Grant, old money martyr with pearls older than my career, who broke the détente. She showed up at my doorstep wearing a navy blazer and eyes like polished knives. "I thought you were smart," she said, "but this is vindictive." I leaned against the door frame, toothbrush still in hand. "Your son called me a slacker." I showed him what one can do with enough slack in a match. She didn't flinch. "You won't win. He's still family, still a Grant." I smiled. "Exactly, and that's the problem." Then I shut the door in her face. That same week, someone broke into my old office. The security footage was mysteriously corrupted, and no one knew who authorized the re-entry badge, but I did. I'd left a red Sharpie mark under the bottom drawer handle. It was gone. They were looking for the original contract. Too late, because I hadn't just hidden the clause, I'd replicated it. Digitally, physically, securely. And I'd left behind one more ticking surprise, a separate document, time-locked on a server under my name, encrypted and programmed to release if Miles took any retaliatory action against any former employees linked to my department. He didn't know it yet, but his career was rigged like a game of Minesweeper, one click away from public detonation. The beautiful part? I wasn't doing any of this from the shadows. I was visible, accessible, laughing with ex-colleagues at brunch spots, publishing quiet LinkedIn updates with subtle jabs hidden in the endorsements. I was haunting him in plain sight. And then the phone rang again, not from Grant Corp, but from someone who shouldn't have known my number, someone whose name hadn't been uttered in that building for years. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. The name on the caller ID stopped my breath mid-laugh, Jonas Vale. 8 years ago, he was the ghost behind every merger, the corporate necromancer who turned bankrupt brands into shareholder wet dreams. Grant Corp had poached him once to gut a rival, then buried his name like radioactive waste when he got too close to the family's offshore labyrinth. He wasn't calling to catch up. Clause 7B, he said before I could speak. Wasn't your first masterpiece, was it? I stared out the window, watching a bird pick apart a muffin someone dropped on the curb. Depends, you calling to threaten me or offer me a job? He chuckled. Low, calculated, neither. I'm calling to warn you. Patricia's not letting this die quietly. She's waking old dogs. I knew exactly what that meant. Grant Corp didn't just bury skeletons, they paid them to stay buried. Former execs silenced vendors, 2 whistleblowers who disappeared into NDA purgatory, and one ex-CFO named Daniel Marin who had a reputation for making clauses go away. He was the fixer, and if Patricia was bringing him back in, then this wasn't damage control, it was a counteroffensive. By the end of the week, 3 unsettling things happened. My LinkedIn got temporarily restricted due to a report of suspicious behavior. My former team lead, April, texted me a screenshot of her inbox, an internal memo requesting a behavioral performance review of all employees who had worked under me in the past 5 years. A man in a charcoal coat started showing up outside the Pillate studio I'd been visiting on Tuesdays. Same car, same seat, same dead eyes. They weren't just trying to clean up the mess. They were trying to erase the blood trail. So I did what I had prepared for, but hoped never to use. I flew to Sacramento. There, in a climate-controlled locker rented under my grandmother's maiden name, sat a single manila folder. Inside, printouts, signatures, audio files, a 12-minute recording of Lee Grant making promises during a vendor dinner. Promises involving stock manipulation, offshore laundering, and one very specific phrase: if my idiot son ever takes over, burn it all down. I'd been recording before Clause 7B was even a thought, back when I still believed I could earn respect the clean way. This wasn't revenge, this was insurance. But I knew one thing Jonas didn't. Patricia wasn't after control, not anymore, she was after absolution. She wanted the Grant name sterilized, scrubbed of scandal before the next phase, the IPO, and a week before the board vote I got the final confirmation, an unmarked envelope under my apartment door. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a draft press release, Grant Corp to go public, reinvented, reborn, and reclaimed, and just below that, Miles Grant to be named CEO Emeritus. They were setting him up as a sacrificial icon, a phoenix made of ash and PR spin, which meant they were going to bury everything I'd done, rewrite the story before it reached daylight. So I made one phone call, not to a lawyer, not to a journalist, but to someone I'd ghosted for years. My sister, because she didn't just work in finance. She was the ghostwriter for half the IPO roadshows on Wall Street, and she hated the Grants more than I did. I hadn't spoken to my sister in 4 years, not since I missed her wedding to finish a grant proposal for, ironically, Grant Corp. She answered on the first ring. You either have cancer or a plan, she said. I exhaled. Both, if you count capitalism as a terminal illness. She didn't laugh. She never did. Margot was forged from Wall Street steel and caffeine breath. She edited SEC filings like they were HACUS, and once threatened to staple a managing director's tongue to a prospectus for saying synergy unironically. I need you to bury an IPO, I said. That got her attention. You want me to sandbag a billion-dollar launch? She asked, voice suddenly quieter. You do realize who you're screwing with. Same people who made Dad sell his patent for 10 cents on the dollar and a mug with their logo. Silence. Then, send me everything, so I did. Every document, every email, every suspiciously perfect quarterly report Miles had filed from his efficiency initiative. We both knew half those numbers were massaged harder than a Hamptons housewife. Margot didn't just read between lines, she carved new ones. 48 hours later, she called me from a burner. You're sitting on enough insider rot to nuke 3 board seats and delay their IPO by 9 months minimum. Delay? I asked. That's the legal route, she said. But if you want scorched earth, I've got something better. Her voice changed then, lower, conspiratorial. They're using a shadow firm in Delaware to reroute IPO shares pre-launch. Shell company, no trace, but I traced it anyway. I could feel my pulse climb. And the firm's registered to a holding entity in Luxembourg. I blinked, so it's listed under an alias I've seen before, Patricia's. She's planning to divert shares, get out before the audit findings surface. That press release naming Miles, a decoy. She's not burning him, she's buying time. Suddenly the puzzle twisted into a weapon. Patricia wasn't trying to preserve the Grant legacy. She was laundering it, whitewashing the name with a farewell tour while cashing out in the background like a magician misdirecting the crowd. And Miles, he wasn't the sacrifice. He was the cover fire, and then Margot dropped the final match. She's holding a pre-IPO investor mixer next Thursday. Invite only. Closed doors. NDAs at the door, cameras banned. I knew what that meant. It wasn't a party. It was a bloodletting in designer shoes. My sister exhaled into the phone. You want to end this. That's your stage. Crash the mixer, drop your file, and let the sharks do the rest. I won't be on the list. You will now. She sent me a name, Isabel Dorrance, a boutique fund manager with a Chanel addiction and an allergy to due diligence. Margot had ghost-written 3 of her last earnings decks. She owed her. By Thursday, I had a new dress, a forged invite, and a 64 GB drive shaped like a Cartier key. One goal, hand-deliver hell to the most dangerous woman in the city and make her thank me for the privilege. Because if Patricia wanted to play legacy games, I came ready to bury hers beneath my heels. The mixer was held inside a converted observatory, half glass, half ego, with violinists playing so delicately I wondered if they were paid to avoid making sound. I stepped out of the hired black car at exactly 7:06 p.m., 36 minutes after doors opened. That was intentional. Come too early and you're desperate. Come too late and they know you're hiding something. Come at the exact point where cocktails dull the senses but deals haven't inked yet. That's when the wolves show their throats. My alias, Isabel Dorrance, was printed on a gold-foiled name tag clipped to my waist. The woman at the door barely looked up from her tablet as she waved me in. Margot's contact had done their job. The place smelled like ambition and candle wax. Conversations floated like smoke, SPAC rumors, tech layoffs, someone casually mentioning they'd just bought a vineyard to detox from private equity. I spotted Patricia by the bar, wrapped in a navy silk number that probably cost more than my grad degree. 2 men flanked her, laughing a second too late at everything she said. She hadn't seen me yet. Good. I floated past a group of venture vultures debating NFT real estate, straight toward the side corridor marked staff only. At the end was a security door guarding the server room. Patricia's tech guy had insisted on on-site encryption for peace of mind. Perfect. I paused, pretended to fumble with my clutch, then reached under my sleeve and peeled off the tiny adhesive strip Margot had given me. A cloned RFID chip tied to one of the caterer's badges. The lock clicked. Inside, humming fans and racks of blinking lights greeted me like old friends. I moved fast. The folder on the USB was titled Blue Heron. It contained everything: the vendor laundering patterns, the ghost shares, the Luxembourg routing slips, and one redacted email chain between Patricia and an anonymous banker arranging early access dividends. I slotted the USB into the main terminal. No hacking needed, just timing. The system was syncing a live investor presentation across all rooms. A touchpad offered 3 stream options: Investor Deck Public, Investor Deck Restricted, Emergency Broadcast. Guess which one I chose. 10 seconds later, a flat chime echoed through the observatory and every screen flickered. Gone were the warm photos of board members shaking hands. In their place, a scanned memo signed by Patricia herself. Advance allocation to shell accounts, discreet as discussed. Gasps. Silence, then shouting. One investor hurled their wineglass against a wall. I stepped back into the main hall right as Patricia turned, her expression already contorting midward. Her eyes locked on mine. Recognition hit her like static. You, she hissed. I told you I'd bring receipts, I said, smiling. A man in a pinstripe suit, SEC badge half concealed behind his pocket square, turned toward her, eyes wide. You signed this? Patricia didn't blink. It's fabricated. Shrugged. Then you won't mind us verifying it against your real server. That was the beauty of the whole thing. I hadn't just uploaded the file. I duplicated her entire server on a mirrored drive and sent a timestamped copy to Margot's contact in the press, under the condition it only went live if I didn't text still breathing by midnight. Patricia's lips curled. You think you've won? I think I just turned your legacy into evidence, I said. She lunged forward a half step, hand trembling, but not with rage, with fear. The violinist had stopped playing, and somewhere in the crowd, someone began to clap, slow, sharp, deliberate. I turned, Miles, looking far too sober for someone whose life was now a bonfire, and he was smiling. Miles clapped like a man who'd finally watched the plane crash he'd secretly hoped for. Bravo, he said, strolling through the crowd like a snake shedding its skin. Really, all these years and this is what it takes to make my mother shut up. Patricia spun on him. You knew? His smile didn't falter. Of course I knew. You think I didn't notice when our IPO shares started disappearing like socks in a hotel dryer? Her jaw clenched. You ungrateful little I'm a Grant, he said, raising his glass in mock salute. Ungrateful's in the DNA. Everyone was watching now, phones recording, whispers ricocheting like ricin. No PR team could mop this up. This wasn't a leak, it was a detonation. I stood very still, unsure if I was witnessing the unraveling of a dynasty or the opening number of a very ugly encore. Then Miles turned to me. I should thank you, he said, sauntering closer, drink in hand, voice low. You didn't just burn her, you made room for me. When the board pulls the plug on her, guess who they'll turn to? I narrowed my eyes. You're delusional? No, I'm inevitable. He leaned in, and don't think I didn't notice Clause 7B. Daddy warned me about your little insurance policy, but guess what? He's dead. And the clause only triggers if I retaliate. He smiled, slow and poisonous. What if I just absorb you instead? I blinked. Excuse me, I'm offering you a job, EVP of strategy. Same salary, bigger budget. You'd report directly to me. You clearly know where the bodies are buried. Hell, you dug the graves. So join me, clean it up from the inside. Let the rats drown with her. The audacity stunned me. He wasn't scared. He was rebranding. This wasn't a concession. This was a hostile takeover in slow motion. Patricia had been outmaneuvered, and now her son wanted to turn me into his personal dragon slayer. Flip the narrative. Whistleblower turned visionary, that kind of garbage headline investors drool over. I already have a job, I said, voice cold. Oh, he said, sipping. Do tell, making sure neither of you ever holds power again. His smile faded, just a flicker, but I saw it. You won't win, you know, he said softly. People forget, money mends, legacies, they rot, but they grow back, not this time. He stepped closer. Then consider this your only warning. You come at the throne again, I won't use words. I didn't flinch. Neither will I. And then Patricia snapped. She reached for the mic at the front podium like a drowning woman grabs a life ring. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, voice trembling, this is a coordinated smear campaign. The documents you saw are maliciously altered and being handled by authorities as criminal fraud. Too late. Behind her, the main screen lit up again, this time not by me. Incoming call, SEC Enforcement Division. The sound system pinged once. A man's voice crackled through. Formal and unbothered, this is Special Agent Marcus Klein. We are currently issuing a freeze on Grant Corp's pending IPO review under suspicion of securities fraud, internal laundering, and executive misconduct. Do not attempt to leave the premises. Gasps. Phones lifted. Someone dropped a champagne flute. Patricia dropped the mic. Literally, Miles froze. His glass slipped from his hand and shattered against the polished concrete. And me? I pulled out my phone. Typed 2 words, still breathing. Then I turned to leave, but I didn't make it to the door because someone was already waiting for me and they weren't smiling. He was tall, lean, and dressed like a man who knew the value of silence. No name tag, no drink, just a slate-gray suit and eyes like overcast glass. Miss Caldwell, he said, my real last name, not the alias. I didn't answer. I just kept walking. He stepped in front of me, not aggressive, just movable. I believe you have something that belongs to us. Wrong sentence, wrong tone, wrong decade to talk to a woman like that. You'll have to be more specific, I said, tilting my head. A conscience, a soul, an actual functioning audit department? He didn't smile. I'm not here to threaten you. That's a relief. Everyone else has dibs. He handed me a card. No logo, no title. Just a single line of embossed text. T. Marin Daniel Marin, the fixer. Patricia's last night. Oh, he was real. I used to think he was just a boardroom campfire story, someone you blamed when NDAs erased memories and whistleblowers woke up rich but ruined. What's the play? I asked, slipping the card into my bag. Offer me hush money and a ride to somewhere sunny? He shook his head. I'm not here to stop what you've done. That's already past the threshold. Then why are you here to stop what you might still do? I felt my jaw tighten, like he didn't blink. Like releasing the third archive, the one that isn't in Clause 7B, the one even Patricia doesn't know about. My stomach did a quiet little pirouette because he was right. There was a third archive, hidden so deep not even Margot had access. It wasn't about the IPO, it was about the foundation. The donations, the shell charities, the pipeline of money from Grant Corp to politicians who later pushed legislation that padded their stock for a decade. Is that a threat? I asked. It's a suggestion, he said, voice like gravel rolled in velvet. Let the fire burn this high. Don't turn it into a war. I stepped closer. Tell Patricia, wars are how legacies end. He tilted his head. Then don't be surprised when no one comes to clean up the ashes. Then he vanished into the crowd like fog through a crack. Outside, chaos, press vans, a woman screaming about insider trading, Miles trying to shout over his own lawyers, Patricia in a car with tinted windows refusing to open the door. And me? I walked 3 blocks in heels I couldn't feel anymore, sat down our 24-hour diner off Lexington and ordered pancakes I wouldn't eat. I pulled out my phone, one message waiting from Margot. Still want to nuke the rest? I stared at it for a long time. There were 2 buttons on my drive interface, sync complete and delay release. If I tapped the former, Final Archive would hit every inbox from the DOJ to the Times to a podcast that loved turning corporate corruption into 3-part episodes. If I tapped the latter, I could wait, watch, let them twist in the wind, see who tried to crawl back. But then the waitress placed the check beside my untouched pancakes and said, whatever you're thinking about, honey, make sure it's worth the silence. And suddenly I remembered the voicemail. Ellie Grant's voice. If my idiot son ever takes over, burn it all down. So I tapped, sync complete, and watched the world start to melt. The world didn't explode, not right away, it cracked. First came the silence, the kind that follows a deep impact. Margot called it the inhalation period, that eerie hush before panic finds its voice. By morning, 5 journalists had pinged me for quotes. 2 SEC officials requested voluntary cooperation. 1 former board member emailed me a single word, respect. The archive scorched like acid. Every transfer, every dark money PAC. A congressional aide named Fisher, whose wife received a six-figure donation from a Grant Corp education initiative 2 weeks before she introduced a loophole-laden tax reform. I didn't even know half the names in those files. But someone did. And those someones were very, very loud now. I sat back and let the sharks feed. Miles was the first to fall. On day 3, the board suspended him pending investigation. On day 5, a video leaked, him drunk, ranting in the Grant Corp sauna about how ethics were for interns. By day 7, he deactivated everything but his lawyer's number. Patricia held out longer. She always did. A spine of diamond and deflection. But even she couldn't outspin the reality of bank transfers traced through 6 countries, all pinging back to a Luxembourg holding firm with her maiden name buried in the fine print. On day 10, she released a statement. After a lifetime of service, I am stepping away to focus on my family and personal wellness. Translation: the fire reached the yacht. The company went into freeze mode. The IPO was officially pulled. Half the leadership resigned. The Grant's name, once printed in serif gold on building plaques and philanthropy walls, is now shorthand for cautionary tales in business schools. And me? I didn't take another job, I didn't sign a book deal, didn't give an interview, didn't even update my LinkedIn. I disappeared, but not completely. I bought a little house upstate, something old and crooked, painted the mailbox bright red and planted lavender around it like my mother used to. Margot visited once a month, always bringing coffee and headlines. She called it the victory report. I called it inventory because you don't win wars like this, you survive them. One morning, 2 months after the final archive dropped, a letter arrived. No name, no return address, just a single sheet. Thank you. You finished what I was too afraid to start, Re. I hadn't heard from her since the deposition. She'd vanished after the fallout, presumably somewhere safe, somewhere quiet. Seeing her handwriting hit harder than I expected. I folded the letter twice, and once more, and slid it into a drawer next to Elie's voicemail. Still saved on a burner I kept powered off. Not because I needed to hear it again, but because there are certain ghosts you don't delete. That night, I poured a glass of wine and watched the stars melt into the river below the hill. A fire cracked nearby. The air smelled like cedar and endings. I didn't smile, I just breathed. Because legacy is a funny thing. Sometimes it dies with a name. Sometimes it's rewritten by the woman they called a slacker. The one who left quietly and lit the fuse on her way out. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.